Warning, due to some language and subject matter, listener discretion is advised.
Once again, we find ourselves in the Halloween season looking for the truth in the unknown. Apparitions, haunted places, ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, conspiracy theories, all of these topics seem to spark more interest this time of year, and with good reason. My next guest is a podcast host whose podcast, Necronomicast, covers all of these topics and more, including true crime. I'm super excited to have fellow musician and friend Brian J. Corey joining me on the podcast today. Here's to getting the Halloween season off on the right foot. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. Brian J. Corey from Necronomicast. How the heck are you, man?
I'm doing really good. I am so excited to be a part of your program. You do a great job, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. It's words of encouragement from gentlemen such as yourself that keeps it going for me.
Right on, man. We all need a pat on the back.
Right. Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you and I share in common, and you still have a foot in the music world. I don't any longer, but we both kind of come from the band world, and now we're like deeply entrenched into the podcast world.
Yeah, we're progressing as old men, I think it is, right?
Is that what it is? Is it the old guy thing to do?
I don't know. I don't think that's kind of a joke, but my clubbing days and playing in punk clubs, I'm done with my feet sticking to places on the to the floor, like places like Cog Factory and things like that. I much prefer, sitting in my little studio here and, conversing with the world. But the music, I know you were super heavily involved in it. It had a ton of successful groups and you had your share of the limelight and all that. And, I did myself too. And they're great memories, man. It's great. I'm 46 now and, it's my rock band and punk band and ska band days are probably behind me. So.
It's funny because I'm sure you get it too, where at least once a year somebody tries to get you to crawl out of the woodwork and do it again.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Sure. And I'm happy that, a number of years ago, I was in a ska band called Jimmy Scaffa, and we had a 25, I think it was, or it was our 20-year reunion, 20-year reunion, but we're having another one next year, and I'm going to be a part of that. And somehow, I mean, Dan Stewart, Dan, he's putting that together.
Yeah,
that'll be a good thing. I played at that new jazz club last year, the Jewel here in Omaha. That was a lot of fun. But most of the time, man, it's just church and weddings and gigs like that right now for my trumpet playing.
So let's talk a little bit about Necronomicast. Why don't you explain to my listeners what your podcast is all about?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Necronomicast, it started in 2011, believe it or not. And you know him, I know him, but there is, your listeners won't. His name is Wayne Brecky, and Wayne in Omaha was known as the Pod Father. He really embraced podcasting, not only just as a way to get information out, and he made it an art form here in Omaha. I mean, he had the Worlds of Wayne, which lasted a real long time. And I still prod him once in a while to, kind of resurrect it back up. And he's an entrepreneur and he's always got, different things going on, cooking in his life. But he started with a guy named Tim Welch, the Necronomicast. And it started off as a way to discuss their love of horror movies. And Tim had an inside track with his, he was really involved with like independent filmmakers, and so he got a lot of that kind of guest on the show. He was really involved with special effects makeup and things like that. So they talked about horror movies. They had people in the horror industry on, and then a couple years later, Wayne tinkered with the show, had some other guys on, and invited me kind of as a guest because I was just kind of local Friday the 13th horror film guy. And then we all fell in love with each other, and he asked me to be a co-host. Then I kind of was a producer of that for a while. And then just as things, progressed in life, I was thinking about starting my own show. And Wayne was kind of getting out of it. And so we chatted, and he's like, why don't you just take it over and kind of rebrand it as your own thing instead of starting from scratch? And so I was really glad when him and his wife, Lori, offered me the opportunity to take over Necronomicast and kind of make it my own with their blessing. And I've just been rocking and rolling ever since.
And what kind of topics are you covering now with Necronomicast?
Yeah, the tagline for the show is the horror of Hollywood and beyond. So we talk about, I talk about, horror movies, but the beyond part is like what inspires horror movies, like the true stories, the true crime, paranormal topics. And frankly, with COVID, there wasn't a lot of movies to talk about, like a lot of new movies and things like that. So I've been really leaning heavily on paranormal topics and authors and thinkers and writers. True crime had just a really good year, a good solid year, I think, of guests for the true crime and things like that. I had a psychotherapist on talking about the Chris Watts murders. My favorite episode beginning of the year was with a guy named Scott James, and he wrote a book about the nightclub fire, the Great White Nightclub fire at the Station nightclub.
Wow.
Yeah, fantastic, fascinating story. And he wrote such a masterful book about it. So that kind of also ignited some of my musical ideas too, talking about, all of our days, Mike, playing in clubs and cheap pyrotechnics and studio foam that might be flammable or it might not be. Who knows? That was a really interesting episode, but I try and keep kind of the things that inspire horror movies, kind of the darker side of things. That just seems interesting to me. I've had an interest in paranormal and things like that ever since I was a small boy. So
I think we come from that generation where it really kind of apexed for us. Like horror movies really peaked in the 80s, where the greatest characters were born, realistically.
Sure, it's the modern golden age of horror. I mean, like you think about the Universal and even the Hammer films.
Right.
They had all the great Dracula, Wolfman, on and on and on. Now we have Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, Pinhead. Michael Myers has got a movie coming out next week, for Pete's sake, with Halloween Kills. So, yeah, the 80s were such a great time for special effects. I mean, me and my friends, we knew about Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers, but we also knew about Stan Winston and Tom Savini, and Kevin Yeager, the great special effects makeup artist that created all that shit, and the directors of the time too. And it was really an exciting time, a great time to sneak into R-rated films when you're 12, 13, 14 years old,
Yeah. Now we let our kids watch it with discretion. I think my son, who's 12, he threatened me with, almost certain death if I watch Halloween Kills without him. So
no shit, dude. That just happened to me tonight. I was talking to my son because I bought pre-tickets already to go see it next week with some friends of mine. And I've been trying to initiate him into the world of horror. Now my daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. See, okay, good. We got something more in common than I even knew. My son, we watched, starting beginning of the year, sort of, we started watching he watched all the Friday the 13th films, and now we watched all the Halloween films, except we didn't watch the Rob Zombie ones because he's 12, and I'm like, those are a little, those are Halloween 4. Yeah, people get chopped up in that one, but it's not like the Rob Zombie ones. So,
right.
But and now we're about halfway through the Freddy Krueger saga, and it's when he watched the first 8 of Friday the 13th, I actually bought him the Blu-ray DVD 8 film set and kind of gave it to him as like a graduation gift, like, here you are, son, take this and use it wisely. So
let's talk about the paranormal a little bit, because about a year ago, actually exactly a year ago this week, I had a mutual friend, Johnny Hauser, on my podcast.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, Johnny's a good dude. And we actually recorded the episode at the Villisca Axe Burner House.
I got to give you some props on that one, because my latest episode that just dropped last week of the Necronomicast, I interviewed an investigator recorded inside the Malvern Manor.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly where I was going with this is Malvern Manor, Villisca Axe Murder House,
right?
Ball Cemetery. And is there something about the Midwest, or is it just boredom?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about Villisca Axe Murder House, when we talk about the Malvern Manor, when we talk about places like even in St. Joe, Beatty Mansion, the Sally House, the McInter Villa in Atkinson, Kansas, those places just wellsprings of history. First of all, if you don't believe in ghosts and things like that, fine, but the history and how it lives on through the stories of the community. Vastly important. So if there's no such things as these ghosts and phenomenon that we investigate, the stories just live on their own without any kind of spirit after death kind of a thing. But yeah, the Midwest, there's a lot of crazy stuff in Iowa, man. The Farrar Schoolhouse. I was just there a couple months ago, again for an event, and it's just amazing that these jewels of paranormal activity and history are just 90 minutes away, 2 hours away, an hour away. It's we live in a real crazy. I call it on my show the haunted heartland, and that's the truth for real.
Yeah, that's a really fair assessment, because I mean, there's other places that have some sort of folklore attached to them. Hummel Park, and I had mentioned Ball Cemetery, and there was a really good episode of the Unsolved Mysteries podcast that covered that. I don't know if you ever listened to that.
Oh yeah, I heard that episode for real. You got to be, hey listeners, if you're out there, I know even international listeners, if you want to go out to the Ball Cemetery, you got to watch out for the caretaker. that old dude does not like people coming out to the cemetery.
We were staying at Kimberly Creek Resort, which is like this little resort area, and it's about 10 minutes away from Ball Cemetery. Yeah. And my wife and I are sitting around the campfire, and I played that Unsolved Mysteries episode, and she was like, we need to get in the car and go there. And I'm like, do you want to be shot at with rock salt? Because you're going to get shot at with rock salt. Yeah.
Do not go out there when that cantankerous fellow is prowling around for sure. And bless his heart, he's protecting the place. I mean, he's got his mission to make sure these people rest in peace. So
talking about this haunted heartland, what's a personal experience that you've had with the paranormal?
And that's I like how you frame that as personal experience, because so many of these things I think are almost meant to be personal. They're intimate. I have investigated a couple places. One place in particular, I'll tell you off the air. I don't want the place to get bombarded with paranormal guys in black t-shirts, knocking on the door, because this is a working place of business. But during COVID, they had a staff working, but the nature of their business, they weren't having the nature of the business in operation so much. So I called them and I said, hey, I am a serious paranormal investigator. I'm not just going to go and, I don't know. We all start someplace, but, I want to do my history. I want to do my research. So I did tons of reading. And so when I asked them, I said, I'm just a man, not a team coming out. Can I spend the day there or an hour there or something? They're like, oh yeah. So I went there. And they let me from the basement storage up to the very top of this historic building in Omaha. And it was a very strange, surreal experience, but doors closing, I think I was touched. And when I say I think I was touched, I don't have any proof, and I don't want to have people validate the evidence, because maybe they can't, and then it leads down the roads of non-belief or just dismissal, and I don't want to do that. But I had a door shut on me when I was in this room of the place, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Didn't scare me or spook me. I thought, well, because there's reports of that happening. So I'm like, let's open the door again, and I put the door stop down, and I pulled on that door against the door stop, and it wouldn't budge. And I sat in there another 20 minutes, and just when I was thinking about leaving again, this big heavy doorstop, I suppose I didn't see with my eyes, but the door shut, and it wasn't like a self-closing kind of a door. It was just a big heavy old door, old place, and that shut, and that really it spooked me out, because it has a reputation of doing that. The nature and the history of the room, especially what it was used beforehand, it was just so. I was out of my skin a little bit, not frightened, but just the implications of what we're talking about, Mike. I mean, when we're talking about, human spirit, your essence, your soul persisting after your bodily death, if that's even what we're talking about, because I don't even know what a ghost is. I mean, I read so much about the paranormal, I don't even know what a ghost is anymore, because your mind is just so blown apart by all these different theories and the research that's been going on for hundreds of years. So a long-winded answer to your question there. A door closed on me a couple times, but just the experience of it, it was just really, it just kind of like, what is going on here? What is this all about? It's very strange. And you hear things, EVPs and things like that. And I have theories on that. So, but I don't know how much time you got.
Well, well, so I read a really good quote yesterday, and, throughout my life, I've kind of hopscotched between believer and non-believer, believer and non-believer. And the quote that I read is that we don't have souls. We are souls, but we have bodies.
Yeah, that's fair. I can accept that. I've heard it explained in a number of ways too. Like here's a real simple way. Like, think of yourself as a television, and Mike Clark, Brian Corey were programs on the television. When the television breaks down and you no longer have the television, the program continues in some form. Like if you get mad and you watching a UFC fight and you put your fist through a television set because you don't like what happens, the television's gone. The program, the UFC fight is still happening. It still exists. But right. The television, the vessel, your body, after bodily death, the program continues in some form. And so maybe that's what people have been experiencing since humans walked the earth, since the two sentient cavemen were standing around and one died and the other one's like, what is that all about? I mean, that's where these questions started,
So beyond the paranormal and true crime, are you covering other topics on your show, such as, extraterrestrial encounters and conspiracy theories? And maybe share with me a little bit about that and some of the guests that you've had on your show in regards to that.
Sure. In terms of UFO phenomenon, I had just a couple episodes ago a gentleman by the name of Ben Hansen, who's a former federal agent, and you might recognize him if you do a Google search. Ben, he was a federal agent, a former federal agent, and so he's got a different insight on how things are investigated, and he's had a lot of remarkable documentaries about alien phenomenon and Roswell cover-ups and things like that, and for conspiracy theories, I have a guy coming up out of Michigan, a guy named Craig Chicony, and he is like one of the preeminent Kennedy assassinologists, and also political assassinations of the 1960s. And so I'm really boning up on that conversation right now. I'm reading Mark Lane's book, Rush to Judgment, which is all about the Warren Commission and just about the Kennedy assassination. And it's just so mind-blowing that in this day and age, when people are saying, well, the government can't rig elections. I'm not saying an election was rigged, but the fact that people are saying an election can't be rigged, or with COVID, we know everything in the science and we just need to follow the science. Okay. Well, I seem to remember that African-American people for 40 years were experimented on by the CDC with syphilis. And a president of the United States was gunned down in front of the world in Dallas, Texas, just 60 years ago? I mean, it's just, so when we talk about conspiracy theories and things like that, and people think you wear a tinfoil hat, it's more of just research and doing mental gymnastics to eliminate some of those conspiracy theories. But then a lot of these things persist, especially with the Kennedy assassination. I mean, my goodness. I mean, a president gunned down in front of the nation, and they're telling us that the bullet came from here when it very clearly came from this way, and there's no way Oswald could have shot 3 shots in that amount of time. I mean, I can go on and on about it, but right. I mean, it's so fascinating that if you listen to the people who do this research and their stories and what they've put together, whether you believe it or not, it's just so incredible to have conversations. And I know you feel the same way when you're doing your podcast, that you research a topic, but when you get somebody on the air, the conversation that you have with somebody and the interaction, it just makes it so worthwhile, man. So conspiracy theories, UFOs. Another great guest that I could quit this show tomorrow and just be happy in the fact that I interviewed Bob Gimlin. And Bob Gimlin from the Patterson-Gimlin film, the Bigfoot footage that was filmed in Bluff Creek, California. Roger Patterson died many years ago of cancer, but Bob Gimlin is like pushing 90. And I had the opportunity to talk to him for over an hour. And what a great old school gentleman he was. And to talk to him about what Bigfoot is, what it could be, it was just so amazing. Whether or not you believe it in Bigfoot or Sasquatch or not, just having that conversation with a guy who says, yeah, it's real. I filmed it. It's so worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was going to bring this full circle is kind of differentiating true paranormal investigators from people that are cosplaying as Ghostbusters, intellectuals that question things versus fringe conspiracy theorists, people that have fact-supported evidence of UFOs versus people that are telling off the radar abduction stories, just maybe because they have a borderline personality disorder or something along those lines.
Oh, sure.
As somebody that's hosting a podcast that explores a lot of these topics, where do you find yourself a lot of times? Do you question your own sense of belief, or do you question the sense of the belief of some of your guests? And I'm not saying that as a way for you to tarnish your brand in any way, shape, or form, but like, are there moments where you're like, okay, shit, I believe this, or that might be a little far-fetched?
Oh boy, good question, Mike. Yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit, because I try not to have a concrete belief system in a lot of this paranormal, anomalistic research and phenomenons and stuff. It's what we're doing is what we are looking for when you talk paranormal. We're trying to answer the most burning question that man has had since recorded time is what happens to us after we die. I mean, when people talk science, and if I start bouncing around, let me know. But when you talk science, like theoretical physics, we know that there's 4 dimensions. Well, if there's 4, why not 5? Why not 6? Why not 7? Why not 100? That stuff's all super cool and all. And if you make a breakthrough in physics, that might help explain like the spin and properties of a quark. And if you make a breakthrough in math, it might get you a Nobel Prize in mathematics. But if you make a breakthrough in the paranormal, researching this kind of phenomenon, you've changed the reality of humankind fundamentally forever. And that's how important this stuff is. And so I take it seriously. Parapsychology, the study of it and the evolution of parapsychology is where a lot of our soft sciences came from. Psychology, psychiatry. Parapsychologists were the first ones to discover or to study like recovered memory and post-traumatic stress disorders. They were looking to see how the mind deals with these situations and how the brain works. And you talk about telepathy. There's a guy, Brian David Josephson. He was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and he spent 40 years studying telepathy. And I think he pretty much proved that it's real. He's got evidence. I mean, they gave him a Nobel Prize, and he's got a stamp of himself in England. So I try not to have these concrete beliefs in the paranormal because it ebbs and it flows. And if you spend too much time studying like this tentacle, you're going to miss the octopus. You know what I'm saying? And it's just so crazy interesting. And I believe in God. I'm a Catholic, and I believe in that. That's where I come from. And people say, well, Brian, as a Catholic, how can you believe in ghosts and monsters and UFOs and things like that? And I'm like, well, to me, in my circle of thinking, my circular thinking, all things are possible with God. And not to go down the God road for your listeners if they're uncomfortable with that, but all things are possible. And I think that's a healthy mindset to have. Like I said earlier, believing in ghosts. I don't know what a ghost is. Is a ghost a little essence, an invisible essence of ourselves after we die? Maybe ghostly phenomenon is time travelers. Maybe ghostly phenomenon is aliens. Maybe Bigfoot out in the forest. Why can't we catch him? Well, maybe he's the ghost of a Neanderthal. I mean, like if you want to start getting weird. So, not to ramble on, but I do like exploring the topics. And if things catch my interest and if things make a little bit of, a tumbler clicks into place in my brain, then I'll even explore that a little bit further, man. But the wonders and the mysteries of this world are just, we're never going to figure them out. And so that's why I just kind of jump into them and explore them and then get grounded in my own life with the things I do try to believe in,
Yeah, for sure. So what's a recent phenomenon that's caught your attention more than anything else? What's something that's happened recently that just made you say, I'm going to look into that?
Boy, it bounces around like this. You remember in the summer, there was a lot of hype about the government having disclosure about UFOs.
Yeah.
And people were really hot and bothered about the government coming out and there's going to be disclosure. And I thought, well, we'll see what happens. And they released like a 9-page report. I think that there is absolutely the possibility of life on other planets. And I think it's pretty much possible that they might have visited us or continue to visit us. Now, do I think they're going to try and take us over? Or do I think that they've come here and given us simple human beings like advanced technology and things like that? I don't know. I mean, Mike, have you ever flown to China to explain math to a cat? I mean, why would they do that for us? I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but things that have caught my attention, it's always that kind of thing, like the wonders of the universe, man. Somebody came out tomorrow and if they said that they shot a Bigfoot and they have a carcass, I mean, that would be huge, groundbreaking, wonderful news. But at the same time, I'd be super sad that such a mythical creature that's captured the imaginations of millions of people over thousands of years was shot and killed. So I always open up these websites to check weird stories or things like that and the phenomenon, and I have like a healthy sense of not skepticism, but just a healthy sense of, I got a good bullshit detector. How about that? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, oh, okay. Well, maybe you're just trying to sell a book and more power to you, so I don't know.
Yeah. To kind of answer my own question and throw mine out there.
Yeah.
The Large Hadron Collider, the CERN super collider.
Yeah.
And the Mandela effect.
Ooh, yeah,
that one's the one that has piqued my interest more than anything else.
How about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, have you looked into that much or followed
Not a
that
lot.
much?
Just the cursory stuff that I read that jumps out at me. I haven't done a deep dive into that kind of stuff. But like, what about it is like really fascinating to you? Like, what are you digging about it?
So, I think it's everything from start to finish, because there are certain memories that I have that are like, I remember it being this way, and then it really happened this other way, like logos appearing differently. And the fact that they say that the bulk of it took place after the biggest activation of the super collider, I think in April of 2012. Wow. It's weird because I can correlate that to a lot of things that I was going through personally at that time. So I'm not going to go down that road because it's same thing. Same thing as you. It's like, how much time do you got? I can correlate all of this,
and now in our 5th hour of this episode, ladies.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing I will say to my listeners and to Brian's listeners. Google it. Google the Mandela effect and Google the Large Hadron Collider. It will blow your mind. And actually, Google Large Hadron Collider April 2012.
Yeah. I remember seeing one of your Facebook posts just the other day when Facebook went down. Like afterwards, we're talking about the big blackout of Facebook 2021. How did we all do? Yeah. And isn't that interesting? And if you think about social media and what a crazy influence that in such a short amount of time that it's had on society. That's really interesting to me too. Like how there's a Tibetan concept called a tulpa. It's a thought form. It's a paranormal occurrence where reoccurring thoughts feeling, psychical energy kind of congeals or it manifests itself. Sometimes people think it manifests itself into evil spirits or ghosts or things like that. It's a whole kind of a side topic, the tulpa, the egregore, the thought form. But I can't help but think that with psychical energy out there, and when you're commenting on something, negative way, like you see something, you're like, well, F this guy, and I'm going to tell him exactly what I feel. And you type that out there. Well, you put that out there and you put your negative energy out there. And then millions of people have the possibility of reading it. And then they react to it. And either they are like, yeah, man, I feel the same way, or screw that guy. And so that all this negative energy, my God, is created. And I can't help but think that somehow that manifests itself. I mean, everybody knows that stress causes heart attacks and stress causes mental strain. But when you take that and you put a magnifying glass and you blow it up, you magnify it to the world, and you're reading comments from people from Paris, Texas to Paris, France, negative psychical energy. I mean, I think that's something that I don't even know how you'd even begin to explore that and study that. But it seems like that is a real problem. I mean, it's a real thing that's really kind of shackling humanity right now in a lot of ways. I try and be as positive as I can, and I know you appreciate like the music 311 and positivity and things like that, but it's like fighting that negative energy. It's that I just wonder what's the future of social media in this instant interaction and instant rage and it's going to have on people. That's something to consider too.
Absolutely. I tend to consider myself pretty politically purple. I more libertarian than anything else. Yeah. And with being a guy that does not want government intervention on most things in my life, mm-hmm. I have this deep-seated fear that we need more government intervention in social media right now. I hate to say that because there's a part of me that truly doesn't believe that, but there's research recently that has shown that Facebook's current algorithm, like if you're looking at a comment thread, mm-hmm. Facebook's current algorithm will put the most negative response garnering topic to the top so clicks. You see it first.
Sure.
And so if you're looking at the splinter in society, well, the algorithm is programmed to feed that splinter, Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I love it when people say, I don't want to get political either, but since you mentioned it, when people say, well, I don't believe in organized religion. And I think, oh, well, that's fine. That's your journey. That's where you're at. That's what brings you happiness, I guess. Do you vote on the second Tuesday of November or the first Tuesday, whatever election day is? Do you wear an outward sign of your beliefs with an I voted sticker or a donkey or an elephant button? Do you contribute money or tithe to these political organizations? Do you go to these mass community rallies or it's like, you don't believe in organized religion, huh? Oh, okay. Sure. Okay. That's fine. I get you.
Oh, man. Yes. This is another one where we could go to hour 6 and 7, man.
The marathon.
Absolutely.
It's a weird, crazy world we live in, Mike, and nobody, the thing is, nobody knows. Everybody thinks they have the answer to something, like this is the way, this is the truth, and nobody really knows. I mean, in a lot of ways, and people say, oh, well, COVID this, COVID that. Oh yeah. Oh, well, nobody knows. I don't think there's a big conspiracy that there's a secret few running the whole world. I think there's a lot of people trying to run the world, and it's just chaos. I mean, it just looks like it's just a cluster everywhere, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we are lazy sometimes, and we're stupid sometimes, and we're irrational many times in our lives. And you know what I'm saying? I don't think there's a secret society controlling everything. I think there's probably a million secret societies that are all trying to get their foot in the door.
Right. And leave it to us to create that sense of escapism for people.
Yeah, right. There you go.
You know, I think that's, I was going to ask you, what's been one of your greatest joys of doing the Necronomicast? And I have a feeling you're going to say the same thing that I would say.
Oh, well, maybe. We'll see. My greatest joy of it right now, honest to gosh, is to interact with people that in everyday life I would never have the opportunity to interact with, and like really have a real, or try to really have a meaningful discussion about a singular topic, kind of trying to have a focus about a topic, whether it's a true crime thing, and it's not sensationalistic or we're glorifying the crimes. We're talking about a lot of times the pain and suffering that ensues from the true crime, the courageousness of the victims that it's happened to, or the diligence and the hard work of the detectives that might have solved that crime. It's not just blood and guts and things like that. It's like the entire story. I love people's stories. That's why I love the paranormal. Like I said at the beginning of your show, it's sometimes paranormal experiences are intimate. It happens for whatever reason to you, and you have to kind of decipher what's happening to you. Did you see Grandma? Did you see Grandpa's ghost? Did you see the ghost of a little girl that might have lived here? Why did you see that? Things like that. It's just so interesting to me, and people's stories. I just love talking to people. I've always been a kind of a personal. I mean, a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A people person, I think is what I'm trying to spit out. I've always been trying to get to know people or learn from them and see how that is like a mirror reflection of something that might be in my life. I just love talking to people. I can talk all night, as you probably can guess.
No, your answer is a lot closer to mine than you might realize. It's developing a connection with people. I've always been a great speaker, but I've always been a horrible listener.
Oh.
And trying to reform connections with people at this phase in life has been super, super rewarding. And exactly what you said, leaning to what you stated, it's just learning from other people and learning about their experiences and learning from a different vantage point and a different worldview, if you will. So,
and you do a great job, Mike. I mean, I think you've got the ball rolling, and it's exciting to see how your show has been progressing. Like it's harder than hell. And as a musician, man, when you write a song or you're putting something out for public consumption, people can be real hard on people that are creators, and you put it out there. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have like a like imposter syndrome.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're a paranormal expert. Well, there is no such thing as a paranormal expert. I mean, you might know a lot about research and history and things like that. But sometimes I'm like, am I qualified to talk to this psychotherapist that wrote a book about this case? Am I qualified? This Emmy Award-winning journalist that wrote this book, am I qualified? And sometimes I got to clear my mind of that and just be like, I'm a human being who finds their work interesting, and they're putting work out there. And so I want to ask them about it. And if they don't want to talk to me or give me a good answer, which thankfully hasn't happened, fine. But the stories, the interaction, it's so rewarding. And, you and I are both making money hand over fist doing this too, right? You know what I mean? It's having a podcast, ladies and gentlemen, it's a license to print money. That's for sure. So that's the real reason we do it, right? Right,
yeah.
Mike?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with constructing new ideas. It has nothing to do with self-growth or bettering yourself or new horizons. It's all fucking cash, man. That's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Holy shit. Dude, I tell you what. So full disclosure.
Yeah.
I think my last few years of playing music, I had to have a serious conversation with myself. I got to a point where like it was just feeding the beast. I was making art to keep other people interested. So before I did this podcast thing, I had to sit down with myself and how could I put the best podcast together that people are going to enjoy? Well, I have to be able to enjoy it myself first. So I have to put together episodes that I would be proud of every episode I finish and something I would want to listen to. And to be honest with you, man, I never did that with music. Music, it was all about other people. But for the podcasting world, it's been about, filling my cup first and then giving it to the world and say, okay, give me your best.
Yeah. My podcast, I feel the same way. My podcast for me is a lot about personal growth and getting to know the world around me. Music, it's so much fun, but so many hours and years of my life I spent alone in a practice room by myself, alone, isolated, playing scales, exercises, getting to be better at my instrument, and then taking all that passion and energy and work that I put in and entertaining other people as the end result. I mean, I do enjoy playing music and everything, but sometimes, that the aspect of just being an entertainer and then people only treating you as entertainment. You know what I mean? I'm like,
right.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, creative people are so hard on themselves too, man. Because you work so hard on something and you have such passion for it. And when it's not reciprocated with congratulations or thanks, or it's hard, it weighs heavily on you. And so with the podcast, at least I know that I'm trying to learn more about the world around me and interact with people and hear people's stories. And,
do you ever go back to old episodes of your podcast and just listen to them just because it's like, man, I didn't catch that the first time around?
Oh, sure. Because I do have a critical ear and I'm really into like, I like recording myself like musically too. So I listen with a critical ear and sometimes I have to stop that because I'm like, I don't care about the compression that I put on my voice. I don't care about if that splice when Brian belched. Excuse me. I had a very good dinner. I worry about those kinds of things, but I do listen back and I'm like, man, I wish I had the opportunity again because I would have asked him this time around, or, ooh, I wish I would have boned up and read a little bit more about this subject because I had nothing to reply to. Like they said something, I'm just like, yeah, cool, man. Or, you know what I mean? There's always like, I could have, but what's neat about it though, is like when I stop recording and I put it into the computer and I put the show music in and then I hit publish and it's out there. It's in thousands of people's phones. It's on the internet. They've got it and it's gone. And then I'm contacting the next guest, or I'm already editing the next show, or it's fun. I don't want it to be just a factory of, I don't want the show just to be just a show factory. I want to put time into each one. But yeah, I go back and listen to them, and sometimes I go back and listen to them. I'm like, wow, that was so cool. I didn't know that, and now I've learned something, and it's so rewarding, man. I mean, podcasting it's so much fun if you have the right mindset and you know what you want to accomplish and you work toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'll hype myself up for an episode and I'll be like, okay, this is what I'm going to ask. This is how the conversation's going to flow. And then it goes nothing like that. And it was perfectly okay.
Yeah, sure. And that's great. And that's because you're a human being. They're a human being. And you never know, like, we texted back and forth like, okay, we're ready. Let's do it. And blah, blah, blah. When we sit down, you don't know what kind of day I've had. It's kind of like ghosts. You go into a place and you're like, there's an invisible creature in front of me and I'm trying to interpret what's going on. Well, you and I through Zoom, we're face to face more or less, but I mean, and we are having a hard time also anticipating the next question or where the conversation's going to go. And you and I don't know exactly what our motivations are. Like when you sit down with somebody like at work, something like that, somebody's right across the hall or right across from you. And that's hard enough to decide what's going on. Forget about some strange space creature or galactic Bigfoot or something like that,
Yeah. That's so in case anybody is unsure, we are making mountains and mountains of money as podcasters, and we're enjoying our lives doing it.
Yeah, it's nothing I'd rather do, man. Right?
So, Brian, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Oh, sure. And thanks so much for this opportunity to talk to you, man. I mean, it's October. It's beautiful weather in Nebraska.
Yes.
I know. Isn't it great? And I can't wait to start decorating outside for Halloween. I got to get that stuff done. For October listening, after you listen to Caught on the Mic with Mike Clark, please visit Necronomicast, and I'll spell it for you because when I was a guest on the show, I had trouble. I mispronounced, like, you could go back to like episode whatever my first one was. I think it was 88 as being a guest on the show. I think I mispronounced the name of the show, and now I'm the host. Necronomicast. The name comes from like the Necronomicon from like the Evil Dead. That's a big favorite of Wayne Brecky. It's Necronomicast, like a podcast. Facebook, Stitcher, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening to Mike, you can find my show. And I try and make it bi-weekly, every other week. That gives me enough time to kind of work ahead on a schedule and not get beleaguered, because I read a ton, man. A lot of my people are authors and stuff, and or documentary filmmakers and things like that. So I have to have time to consume that stuff and think about it before I talk to them. But yeah, if people, if strange things or weird things or, things like that interest you late at night, you're looking for something to listen to, please just give us a listen and that'd be great. Appreciate it.
Dude, that is phenomenal. We got to do this again here a couple months from now.
Yeah, that's fine, man. I'll talk to you all the time. That's great.
Hell yes. Well, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate you doing the show.
Hey, and Mike, thanks so much. And all your listeners out there, thanks for supporting podcasts. Thank you for supporting, us creative guys that are trying and do something interesting. And thank you for supporting our passions. It's a negative world out there, but you got to go out there and look for what's good and what's positive and kind of, and embrace that. So thanks so much for having me on, Mike. I mean, you do a great job, and it's been really a lot of fun. I hope I didn't bore anybody.
I don't think there was a boring second here, man. Thanks again. Yeah. I want to give a big shout out to my friend Brian J. Corey for joining me on the show today. That was a lot of fun. I hope to have him on again sometime in the near future. In the meantime, make sure you go to your favorite podcasting platform, whatever platform you're listening to this on, and you look for Necronomicast. He has fascinating episodes, fascinating guests, and topics that we all love to consume. It's also a great time of year for it, man. It's Halloween season, for God's sakes. If I sound a little bit hoarse and maybe like I've lost my voice, it's because I have been fighting a cold the past week, and it has sucked. But the good news is it's not strep throat and it's not COVID. Make sure you're following me on all forms of social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And I've even got a Twitter page, so give me a like and follow on that page as well. Just search out Caught on the Mic, M-I-K-E, not M-I-C. And I would appreciate that 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.